Hello and welcome to our Cybersecurity Masterclass webinar. We've got 185 CEOs and CFOs with us. I'm joined by three of my colleagues. Today we're going to cover the most pressing cyber risks at the moment, practical steps for CEOs and CFOs, that's leadership steps, insights and real-world examples that we've come across. For those of you who don't know us, Freeman Clarke is the largest, most experienced team of CIOs, CTOs, IT directors, and chief information security officers in the world. We work exclusively in the mid-market on a flexible and fractional basis. We are unique in that we know all the technology vendors, we know all the consultants, but we are entirely independent of all of them. We have absolutely no axe to grind. We've been around for 13 years and many of the clients who launched us are still our clients today. Without further ado though, let me get into the conversation and let me just ask the panel first of all to share some examples of things that they've personally seen where a CEO or a CFO through their own action has improved or diminished cybersecurity at their business themselves. Don, can I start with you?
Yeah, I worked for a small fintech company a couple of years ago. We were rolling out multi-factor authentication. The CEO himself decided that he was just too important for MFA. He said it slowed him down. He was too busy. It was too cumbersome. So he made himself the exception to the rule. Everybody else had to follow MFA. He didn't. As luck would have it, his account got compromised. It wasn't just a minor breach. This was an operational and reputational mess that we had to deal with. Sensitive data was exposed, internal systems were disrupted, and worst of all, the breach firmly pointed back to one person who refused to follow the protocol, which was the CEO. The irony was that he was the face of the cybersecurity policy. He wasn't just a follower. This was his policy. So anyway, long story short, after a couple of days of intense recovery work, patching systems, reassuring clients, trying to rebuild trust, we got things back under control. And the CEO, well, he had a major wake-up call. Not only did he immediately start to use MFA, he became IT security's loudest champion. He completed all of his cyber training within inside of 24 hours and pushed the entire firm to follow suit. No exceptions, no excuses. And more importantly, my team no longer had to chase down stragglers like cyber bloodhounds. Yeah. I think the key takeaway on this one here for me was that if the CEO doesn't follow cybersecurity protocols, then why would anybody else? Leadership sets the tone. Nobody's too important for security.
Yeah, and that's not the first time we've seen that, Don.
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
The idea that security is for everyone else and not for me. Good example, David.
I've had a situation where the chief exec insisted on not having a passcode on his mobile phone, and the phone got stolen. We had to react very, very quickly to do a remote wipe on it. That felt like a bullet that was dodged. Thankfully, he was able to get in touch with us, and we were able to resolve the situation very quickly. But it could have been a whole lot worse.
Jerry.
Yeah, so it's interesting that sometimes you think about the top end people setting cyber strategy, and then there's people on the the coalface learning how to perhaps avoid clicking on the wrong thing, that kind of thing. But a few weeks ago, we actually put together a specific workshop for the senior team, the sort of middle management layer team in this. It's quite a large holiday home business, and that was really effective because it meant that those people who are themselves managing lots of others in the business and have direct influence were properly brought up to speed. That was a very good effect on the business there.
I think the example I was going to share, which in some ways is perhaps the converse of that, is I was at a company recently where they went to the trouble of bringing in cybersecurity advisors to present to the management team about the importance of the issue. But the chief exec, I guess, just as as a way of lightening the mood, sort of said, "Oh, this is all very dull, and no one's really interested in this," as part of his introduction, and in that way, completely kind of punctured it and devalued it for everyone. And so there is something about this that reminds me of things like health and safety and you know, those kinds of matters, which is that the leadership need to demonstrate through their own talk and through their own attitudes the importance of this, because that will ripple down through the rest of the business. The first question, I think, to set the scene is that in some ways, when you helicopter out, then you've got to ask yourself, why is this still an issue? Why is it that after 20, 30, 40 years of technology, this is a problem which is not only unsolved, but which is getting worse? Why hasn't this been fixed? Why are we still talking about it? It seems like something that should have been fixed years ago. What's the story here, and why is this an increasing problem rather than a diminishing one? Jerry, how would you answer that?
So I mean, the biggest problem is the fact that everything is now so connected. I mean, ever since obviously the internet got invented, it took a while for things to get connected. But then after about the year 2000, from then on, things got more and more connected. And those connections are what allows criminals, unfortunately, to get access to things. So the more connected all of your computer systems are to each other and to the rest of the world, the more possibility there is for that attack. And of course, once mobile really took a huge uplift, probably I suppose it was towards 2008 onwards, it suddenly got even more possibilities where you can, there's sort of more of an attack surface right across the mobile world. And so it's just absolutely exploded. And of course, alongside that, the amount of money that can be made from breaking into services is quite outstanding. It used to be that people would break into computer systems just for fun, but of course now it's a business, and it's a multi-billion-dollar business worldwide, where people are literally making money out of either ransoms or direct attacks or stealing resources, all sorts of ways of getting your money. So because that money is there to be had, and it's possible because everything's connected, it's just going to continue. And I don't see that changing anytime soon.
And I guess the point here is what you're not talking about is that the reason this is increasing is because the tools are becoming more complicated, cleverer, and so on and so on. That's not the reason. The reason is simply that there are more devices, there's more connections, and that in some ways we're becoming more stupid because we're just used to clicking hundreds and thousands of things all day. We're used to boxes popping up, accept all, install this. You know, our expectations are just that we live in this world where we click stuff. But in many ways, people are becoming more stupid.
We click things, and we also recognize a lot of big brands. And so there's a lot of attacks happen just because people are hoodwinking you that they are Microsoft, for example. And so and it's very easy to just get sucked into the fact, oh, it must be safe because it's got that name on it. And of course, it could just be, you know, essentially a sticker, you know, graffiti over the top of the real name, if you like. People are quite trusting, and obviously the criminals play on that trust.
Don, David?
Well, I think you've got an issue with the sort of the public facing people within an organization who are generally, you know, they're the people who are seen by the public to be running the organization. It's become very easy to get hold of that information through things like LinkedIn. And then because those people are easily found out, you can generally guess, or you can find out an email address. And then these people, chief execs, managing directors, finance directors, they are significant targets. When you have that information, it's worth putting some time and effort into spearfishing those people.
Yeah, so the idea that anyone can float below the radar now is just not realistic. Social media means that even if you're not a heavy user, your information is out there. And Don's example before, whereas as luck would have it, the chief exec got attacked. Well, it's not as luck would have it. You know, this is what criminals are after. I agree with you. So when you overlay on all the stuff that Jerry was talking about, the social media bit, so it's just too easy to find details out about us.
I think the key thing here is that cybersecurity isn't just a technical issue. This is not a matter of entering an arms race and having better technology than that. You generally find that it is your people. They're either your strongest defense or they're your weakest link. And, you know, everyone gets tired, right? Lots of pop-ups are hitting you. You're trying to do work. yes, accept this, move on. Oh, that's going to make my life convenient. Let's get in there. That's how the criminals get in there. And generally, you're finding that a lot of cyber attacks are now being done through social engineering, through fairly low-tech ways of getting in, rather than brute force trying to hack their way through rather sophisticated firewalls and stuff like that. It's looking for your people. So you've got corporates need to be aware of that people can be both your strongest and your weakest link.
That low tech point, again, I would just reinforce that we rarely come across complex, sophisticated attacks, but every day we come across low tech, simple attacks. And I guess the example of that, which I'm always struck by, is the QR code attacks that you get in car parks. Which is just someone literally putting a sticker on top of the paying machine, because our phones are glued to our hands. Everything now is online, and so it's possible for people to just attack us in a million different ways. And so it doesn't have to be clever. It's all about volume, and I think that's the message we're trying to get across. Is this is fundamentally a people issue and a cultural issue and a leadership issue. And if you get those things right, you can move yourself into the relatively or the safe enough zone, because actually sophisticated high-tech attacks are really quite rare.
Because you also can't avoid using social media. I mean, if you're in business, you're encouraged to be on LinkedIn, to post, to be widely connected, and for other people in your business to be to have their details on as well. So it's not like we can advise people, oh, don't put anything out there. That will never work. Every business coach will tell you ought to be very present on those systems. So it is, yeah, the only way is to be aware that this stuff can happen and kind of have an awareness of the types of thing that people might do, because it will perhaps give you a trigger point as to protect yourself. But yeah, this is it's definitely here to stay. And of course, it's, if anything, it feels as if it's been accelerating, because all that information, you could argue, has been around for, say, 10 years. I mean, LinkedIn isn't new. People have had websites and put their company, who's in my company pictures on their websites for years. But I guess the difference is today that it's so easy to scrape all that data off LinkedIn, and perhaps even using AI tools to gather it all together and really give some insight for the hacker to make a very easy targeted attack that makes it really look like they've got inside knowledge, and it feels like it must be real.
One of the questions that came in before during the registration process was from Ben, who asked about the Marks and Sparks hack. And I think that there was some information that the hackers had got from LinkedIn on the IT department and the tools that they were using. So the other thing I was just going to add before we go on to the next bit was that just to state the obvious about this, it's the rule of the jungle. It's the law of the jungle. We're largely every man for himself. You're not really protected by the authorities, although there are organisations like National Cyber Security Centre and so on that are publishing information out there. Our protection is our own problem. In the normal world, you can call the police. In the normal world, the authorities do things to protect you. Broadly speaking, no one is out there to protect businesses. They have to do it themselves.
That's certainly true. I would say, in the defense of the police, I would say the response that the police have to a cyber incident, let's say from when I was involved in responding to things back in, say, 2008, was terrible compared to how it is now. It's so much better. They themselves have increased the amount of expertise they have. But what you're saying, though, is true, because the equivalent of, they're not driving around town in a car watching the streets. It's that there's no equivalent of that that the police do. They're very responsive, and they will help you as far as they can, and they want to try and catch the perpetrators, though it's extremely difficult since much of it is from abroad. So it's they often get stymied at that point. So you're absolutely right. The bit about protecting yourself, it is, 100%. It's more or less up to you as an individual business to decide what you need and how best to protect yourself.
The police are actually they've sort of set themselves up across the country and got networks out there. but it's more of the inform and show you how to do the basics right, which is lock your doors, close your windows at night, all of those sort of basic things which are low tech, low cost, but are extremely effective, because effectively they're not trying to stop the hacker that really wants to come in through your door with a battering ram. If he wants to get in, he's going to get in. If a state actor wants to get in, what they're really doing is just sort of saying, if you locked your doors and closed your windows, somebody's going to rattle that, and then they're just going to go next door and they'll look for the guy that's left the door open, and they'll go in that way. So you're just trying to be better than the guy next door. If you're more secure than the guy next door, likelihood is that you're going to be safer.
And I think that maybe is our key message there, that in all the years we've been doing this, we've seen many, many attacks, but we've seen very, very few that were seriously clever.
And it's also worth saying that actually the police do get involved in a lot, and we know this because the Office of National Statistics collects data that's, of course, on cybercrime, and it's something, recent years it's been nearly 50% of all businesses have had an incident in each year. Yeah. So they're busy, they're busy at the very least recording the fact that these things have taken place.
Yeah, so let's just put those 2 points together before we move on. The first one being, getting the basics right is not that hard. And if you get the basics right, you're probably okay. But most businesses don't get the basics right. So there is an element, kind of a no-brainer. Let's move on then. And so the second area we were going to get into was then, how does an organization assess its risk, and critically its risk appetite from the point of its strategy? And I think this ties in with a question that Matt just posed here about how do you highlight the importance of investment in cybersecurity, and a couple of questions that came in beforehand, which were about security posture. So Richard asked, I thought, an interesting question about how do you determine an appropriate security posture, and then someone called Gareth was talking about avoiding something which is overcomplicated. So Jerry, can you just start on this question of how does a business assess which way it's facing, which way it needs to face in terms of cybersecurity?
Yeah, so I typically start by thinking about it in terms of, well, we all can see in a business park, we look around and there are some businesses in a business park that will have bars on the windows and others that don't seem to, and they seem to have nothing, no physical security at all. And it's no different in the cyber world. And you need to think, well, why is it that some businesses seem to want bars and others don't? And that's because they're at different risk levels. Every business is different. And so, of course, a company that's selling jewelry is going to have a lot more physical security in their business than a company that's selling, say, loft insulation, where the product itself is maybe bulky and in a warehouse, but not that expensive. So the same applies, and so if you take one extreme say of a business that is very low cyber risk, there's a company that is a metalworking company that I had repair the railings on the outside of my house, and they do welding of material, and their to-do list is the stack of metalwork that's in their yard, and of course, and they are often paid in cash, so there are very few online transactions, and they don't really have a software system. They've got an accounting. I think they use QuickBooks to do their accounting, so nothing particularly complex. So their risk level for cyber is very, very low, because it wouldn't have much impact even if somebody did try to disrupt them. There's not much to disrupt. Whereas at the other end of the scale, you have a business that perhaps deals directly with the general public. So there's always a worry about privacy and people's personal data. A company that's transacting online is going to be at massive high risk, because their business is literally dependent on the availability of their website and all the systems that run the commerce. And so those are at much higher risk. And then if you layer on top of that some element of branding, or if you are famous, or even worse, infamous, such that people want to attack you somehow, or they see you as a big target because you've got a famously big brand, then your risk levels are through the roof. So somewhere along those lines, there's a point which every business lies. There's in that grey scale of risk. Your company's risk level is somewhere along that. And so the first thing to do is make some kind of valid assessment, a proper assessment of where that really lies. And then combined with that, you have to decide whether or not how much risk are you prepared to accept? Because the first company I ever worked for was I installed some computer systems, and I thought they were pretty expensive at the time. £15,000 seemed like a lot of money to me as a youngster. And when I went to the FD to say, do we need to add this to the insurance policy to say itemize these things? He said, no, don't worry about it. We have an excess of £50,000 anyway. Anything below that, we don't insure. And so that business literally put a number on it, on their appetite to accept risk. And so at the time, 50,000 was a lot of money, but it felt like that way to me. But for the business, it was a risk that they essentially were self-insuring.
So your point here, I think, is we're not starting with what tools and technologies to buy. We're not starting with a detailed report from a cyber expert. Where we're starting here is what business are we in? How much of a target are we? How much could we potentially lose? How important is it to us and our customers if our systems are working, and so on and so on. Don, what were your thoughts?
Pretty much along the lines of where Jerry was going, but I was really more from the charity side of things. We've had a number of charity organizations sort of saying, well, why would anybody want to come and talk to us? And there's real value that what they've got there. There's two parts to it. One is the personal data. They have a lot of names and addresses and telephone numbers and so on, and that's worth money to cyber criminals. They're after that data. They'll put it out there, and you can sell it at however many pounds per thousand names out there. So there's that, and then there's the other aspect of they largely deal in cash. They're moving money around all the time, so they're shifting money into their account. They're paying for things. So marry those two drivers along with the fact that charities are generally very cost constrained in terms of things. So they don't spend a lot of money on their IT. And as a result, they become an easy target. Going back to my original example about being better than the guy next door, it's an easy target. And that's what people need to be aware of. So when you are looking at it, you've really got to take what Jerry says there about understanding how risky you are as a business, because charities will pay up. There's enough evidence out there that charities will pay when they get on the ransomware, because they don't need their name dragged through the mud. They're hoping that if by paying it, that it'll just quietly go away, which leaves their reputation intact. And guess what? Your cyber criminals just sort of say, well, that's great. You paid once, you'll pay again, and you'll continue to pay until we eventually bleed you dry. So yeah, it is a risk. It is a risk game. There is no one size fits all, unfortunately, on this one, or a percentage that you could apply to this.
I think we would always advocate that this starts with achieving a level of kind of mutual understanding across the leadership team of the risk, of the appetite, and those things, and getting everyone into a point where they have the same view of it. And one of the things this also achieves is it helps people get their heads out of the sand, because this is such a complex, or seemingly complex, area, and because it's basically a technology problem in a lot of people's minds. They don't even know what to do with it, and a lot of managers end up kind of thinking, well, I'll just put that on the too difficult pile and get on with my job. So this kind of discussion about what's our risk profile, what's our risk appetite, is a way of getting people into this conversation, but in a way that is relevant to them. Does that make sense?
I don't think it's necessarily just an IT thing. I think it's a useful exercise to do, as a holistic exercise for the business, because IT is one element of risk. If you lose a key supplier,
Yes,
that's as existential a risk as anything else.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And actually, we've had quite a lot of questions about those supply chain issues. And I think we've seen in the JLR scenario, you may lose a key supplier, or you may lose your key customer.
Yeah.
And from a business point of view, you'll be going through your list of risks, but you won't identify the fact that your key customer may be put out of action through things which are entirely outside of your control and largely outside of their control as well. So how would you deal with that? So I agree with you, David, that this is a discussion about risk, and this is a discussion about our appetite for it. And cyber is just one part of that. And I suppose my point is this is a way of bringing the leadership team and management team into this discussion, rather than it just be a matter for the IT team. Having said all of that, then we often split this space into two halves. One half is what actions can the organization take, and then the other half is what action can the individuals in the organization take, or do the individuals in the organization need to take. So let's say we start off with the actions that the organization needs to take and the priorities there. So David, can you talk a bit about that, the priorities for the organization?
Well, obviously, if you've completed your business impact and risk impact assessments and you've done all of that, you'll then have a much better idea of what kind of things you need to do. What we do know is that a lot of the breaches that happen are down to a lack of following process or procedure. And one of the best ways of ensuring that you know what your processes and procedures are to have some form of accreditation, whether that be Cyber Essentials Plus, NCSC 10 Steps to Cyber. I mean, these are the more basic ones. You can then look at something like ISO 27001. There are different ways or different accreditations to fit all sizes. I think I would look at those sorts of things. If you're more concerned about the holistic risk to the business, you could look at there's a business continuity standard, which is ISO 22301. That's, in my view, if you're running a business, I think you should look at that. You don't need to get the accreditation, but there are some really interesting and useful elements to that. Having good IT suppliers, making sure you do your due diligence, be very, very wary if they've had an acquisition. I'm really nervous about that kind of thing because my background is running MSPs, and I've seen where MSPs go wrong when they merge or acquire another organization. It introduces complexity and leads to failures in following process. Having penetration tests done is really important, and making sure that the penetration test is not done by your MSP. MSP being managed service provider. Having a response plan is really, really important. When things go badly wrong, knowing how to respond to it can save you weeks. That's a key thing. And if you practice it as well, you're doing tabletop exercises and making sure that everyone who needs to know is aware of what they need to be doing and when, it will save you a lot of time and a lot of headaches. Insurance isn't just about the financial element. It's also it can give you access quickly to the resources that you need, to the expert resources that you need to recover. Reuters have just recently, a couple of days ago, said that Jaguar Land Rover has cost the UK economy $2.5 billion. It's a terrifying amount of money for what was a relatively straightforward, it was a stolen credentials hack. Ongoing right now, we've got the AWS outage, not specifically a cyber hack, but certainly a cyber incident, and that's affecting all sorts of people. It may even be, your managed service provider has got tools that are being held within AWS and they're unable to access those. So they're then unable to provide you with backup. That's a fairly terrifying situation. I know that Druva are having problems with backup at the moment because of this. So they're frantically sending stuff out. Xero, our accounting system, are having problems as well. And, if you're having to make bank payments and do stuff like that, just without access to your accounting system, that's pretty frightening. If you have had a breach, you need to enhance your security stance greater than what would have normally been the standard, because you've got a target on your back. If you look at Harrods have been breached twice. The second one was a direct result of the first one. So you need to be really, really clued in once you've had a breach.
So I mean, you picked up on a few things that relate to some of the questions as well. There's a couple of questions about Cyber Essentials here, and we are big advocates of Cyber Essentials, particularly Cyber Essentials Plus. Cyber Essentials is a fairly simple standard which was created by the National Cyber Security Centre, the NCSC, who we have strong links with, and Cyber Essentials Plus includes an element of independent penetration testing. And that relates to David's point about always having an independent tester rather than having your own IT suppliers marking their own homework, as we would put it. Someone has asked whether we can recommend pen testers, and certainly we can, and whether we can recommend MSPs, certainly we can. I would take that outside of this webinar with us. And your mention of MSPs, I suppose that's a bit like the supply chain conversation before. If you've got IT suppliers or MSPs, as we call them, working for you, and they have a security issue, then that is very definitely your security issue as well. And there was a major problem in the legal sector about a year ago. Maybe we shouldn't.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're trying to get.
It was very, very bad.
Sure, they're trying to get over that now. So maybe we should name.
They don't exist anymore.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And I mean, that was, as you say, very, very bad. So due diligence on your IT suppliers is critical, because otherwise you have a very, very major exposure.
Just a quick point on that. We touched on certifications, and I've seen it with a couple of clients where they're starting to use the certification. Certifications doesn't guarantee you anything. All it does is sort of say we're at a certain level in terms of our cyber awareness and our training and what we do about it. But what a lot of the companies are now starting to do is starting to use that as a differentiator when they're looking forward and they're trying to win business. Just sort of say, you want to do business with us because we take this seriously, more seriously than our competitors. And right now, it's a differentiator. And a couple of clients that we've worked with have gone down that route and seem to be thinking that it's having a positive effect in a positive way rather than in a punitive way. So it's something key to bear in mind as well, that it doesn't guarantee you that you won't get hacked at any point in time. But what it does sort of say is that your hygiene factors are all in place. And
I agree with you, and I think we see that. Jerry, you might have some views on that. I think we see a lot how companies can start trumpeting about these various security badges, because it says something about the fact that they are a serious organization. So if you are the CEO or the CFO of a mid-market business, and rather than getting down into all the dirty details of security, you can just make a simple decision, which is we will go and get accreditation, and that's a flag that we can then wave. And not only do we wave it internally and we can all sleep more soundly at night, but we can also wave it externally and potentially genuinely win business.
100%. In fact, the example I have is that we had a business which was a web hosting firm, essentially, and we decided to become the first web hosting firm to provide PCI compliance. The payment card industry, when that came in, everybody had to keep all their credit card details safe, and we decided to be the first service provider to provide a compliant service, which would take maybe 2/3 of the workload off of the client having to do it themselves, which is a good product. So we built this product, launched it, and it got a modest number of customers, which is great. But as well as that, our general business had an uptick. And when we did the questioning of saying, well, why did you choose to join us? Why did you choose us rather than one of our competitors? They said, well, we saw that you did this security-oriented service, which means you must be good. So even though they weren't buying that product, they regard us as a high-quality service provider because we had that capability. I think that can be used. I think it's, you give that to any marketing person, and I'm sure they would run with it.
I agree with you on that. And can I also just say something else, which I feel passionately about, which is that if you simply regard cybersecurity as some annoying boxes you've got to tick, then you're looking at it the wrong way. You should see it firstly as an opportunity to differentiate yourself as a company that's serious and seriously well organized, but also the things that you have to sort out in order to become secure are also the things that make your business simple, streamlined, efficient, scalable, and so on and so on. A simple business is a secure business, and it's also a good business. So everything that makes a business cyber secure are the things that also make the business generally run well, service their clients well, and kind of scale securely. So I really think it's important to not just see this as an encumbrance, that actually there really is a positive side to it. Okay, so that is the organizational side. On the other side of the coin, then, there's the things that the people in the organization need to do in order for the business to be secure. So, Jerry, can you pick up on that now and talk about what it is that the people need to do?
Yeah, because of course the organizations can they're the ones setting budgets and setting policies and providing tools, all those things. That's what the organizations can do. But we've said that many attacks happen because of people's individual, let's say, not necessarily mistakes, but they get hoodwinked by criminals to let them in. So of course, everybody these days has a responsibility to be on the lookout for that kind of nefarious activity. And so the very first thing as an individual we'd recommend people do is, well, of course, you've got to make sure that you're aware. It's a very basic thing. You've got to be aware of what's going on so that you know what kind of things are likely to happen. So, the fact that somebody can fake an invoice, you should know that that's possible so that you are on the lookout for it. Or you should know that when you receive an email and it says, can you click this link, that you think to yourself, oh, should I really click that link, or should I actually just go independently to the website and see if I can find that, rather than do that. So there are many things that one can do, and most of it is, what I would say is relatively common sense. And if you think about how you can train up your employees, the people that work with your business, contractors as well, there's a lot that you can do to just educate them on all of this kind of stuff. And some of it is you can do formally. You can organize training and courses, and of course there's a lot of information informally as well, that people can educate themselves. So there is a lot to be done there. And so all the stuff that isn't directly covered by a specific process are often the ones that are the success stories, where somebody said, we heard a story where somebody was about to send money to a random bank account because they'd been asked by supposedly their boss to do so. And the thing that this client told us that stopped them was because they had used a nickname for the boss, which that person did use, but not in the context of work. So the person just thought, hang on a sec, that's not the normal name that is used. So being on the lookout and being defensive, and particularly when you're in those risky situations. So of course, anytime you're about to send money, it's a risky situation. So be super doubly careful at those points.
Developing a cyber aware culture is so important, and it comes from the top. It's not something that comes from down, from the IT department. It comes from the C-suite. It has to.
And how does that work then, David? How do they? Because this session is all about that leadership activity. How do they create that culture?
Well, I think the C-suite need to understand that cyber is a potential existential threat to their business, and it needs to be taken seriously. If you're not taking it seriously, treading a very, very thin line.
Yes.
And again, to me, the key message here is that what we're not saying is that the board need to get together and apportion, and create a huge budget for cyber. Of course, there's money to spend and there's things to, but what we're really saying the board need to do is to get together and make this a priority and be seen to make it a priority. And then through their own behaviors, create the culture and create the behaviors that they want to see in others.
Yep.
Yeah. So an example is that a company sets the policy for what should happen in a given situation, but it's up to each individual to follow that policy. And if the leadership are seen to be not following it, then that sends the bad message. So of course it's as always, lead from the front. Make sure that when you set a policy, you follow it yourself. But also just keep encouraging people and keep reminding people of the importance of it. And where it might feel odd. So in the situation where somebody's in a rush and they need you to do this, they need this password reset, or they need the money to be sent here, they're chasing for payment, that's fine. You can teach people polite ways of saying, I've got your details, give me 2 minutes, I'll call you back. And so that that person then, as part of their process, does it out of band, and they call them back off a number that they know for that business and is not a number that was just given to them on the via that call or via a chat. And so and just so teaching people those non-threatening, polite ways of adding security into the conversation without it being that big a deal.
I think that's the acid test there, is that you're trying to create a culture where a junior member of the finance team, where they get a seemingly urgent call from top brass in the organization telling them to do something, move some money, pay something, whatever it is, that junior member of the team feels empowered and knows that the right thing to do is to politely say, there's a process we've got to go through here, even though this is urgent. And getting to that point is a big cultural challenge. But those are the things that protect the organization.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
John.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the technology that the criminals are starting to deploy, the old days of the Nigerian letter of, there's $100 million in the bank, badly spelt, etc. Those were easy to pick up, right? These days now, AI is now even getting to the point of voice, where they're now starting to utilize a senior person's voice, so it comes over the phone and passing these instructions. So it's really important from an individual perspective that you develop this cynicism that says, hold on, this is out of the normal practice. Let me now just politely, as you say, you don't have to be to be rude about it, but politely just sort of say, okay, give me 2 minutes and I'll call you back and I'll double check and I'll sort this out for you. And there are quick ways of doing that, but that's about setting the norms on that one there, and it's about we keep talking about training people. There is software out there that can do targeted phishing attacks and whatever like that. And if you pass, you're fine. But if not, it gives you point-in-time training that sort of says you have to now be trained. It says to the individual, we're taking this seriously. You need to have your guards up, because that's what the criminal's looking for. They're not necessarily coming to Jerry or to David and sort of saying, okay, let's try and hack it through you. They're looking for the weakest link out there, somebody out there that can push a button, that junior clerk that can do something that is slightly out of bounds, but gets scared by the fact that it's a senior guy talking to them.
It's a senior person.
And it's about that culture can only come by, as you said, empowering the individual to sort of say, okay, give me 2 minutes, I will check up on this.
I think this is where our model of what does the business need to do and what do the individuals need to do becomes kind of blurred in a way, because obviously what we're talking here is about the fact that the business needs to create the culture within which people feel empowered to do this. But to me, the point here is that everyone needs to recognize that being secure is in some ways inconvenient. The most convenient thing is being chaotic and insecure until there's a disaster. People have to accept and indeed embrace the fact, because there's no alternative, that a secure business is not going to be as convenient. You can't just get things done in the way you used to, even at the very level, the very simple kind of, segregation of duties, all of these kinds of things. Each of these can either feel irritating or can feel like good practice. And you need to create an environment where people think this is good practice. And of course I go with it and I'm part of it. And I don't write my password on a post-it and I don't break the rules, even though it's inconvenient for me. I promote the rules and I promote the rules to the people around me. That's what we're trying to get to.
I would like to add, actually, that in certain circumstances, doing this does actually make you a far better business and a far more efficient business. One of the problems that we come across on a far too regular basis is the disorganized management of data. And there will be data that contains, special category data. Following the rules and following best practice in the management of your data not only will reduce your risk, but it will make you a more efficient business as well.
Completely agree with you.
And as we move into a period of AI, if you don't have organized data, AI won't help you.
Well, that was what I was going to say. That actually, organized data is not only the basis of cyber security, but it's actually the basis of automation and AI. So again, you're killing two birds with one stone. We're going to go on to some of the Q&A, but before we do that, or let me just point out, after we do that, there's going to be just sort of key takeaways and summaries of what we've talked about. But if I look at the questions that have been asked and try and draw them together, the most common questions have been about where AI is going to fit into this picture. So let's talk about that briefly. How do we see the landscape changing in an AI world?
It's going to affect both the bad actors and the defenses. I think what we're seeing already is that the AI is being utilized by the bad actors, and it's speeding the attack cycle, the attack life cycle, which is really quite scary, because we're now seeing a point of sort of, the point of ingress to the point of exfiltration of data or damage being done being significantly reduced, and that's down to automation and the use of AI. I know Dom mentioned an arms race earlier. I think there will be an arms race. I think defenses will be improved with the use of AI. I think those are the sort of the two things. I think ultimately the status quo will remain the same. You'll just have to keep doing more to be less likely to be breached.
Jerry, any comment on that?
Yeah, I would say that the world we're moving into is one where possibly the greatest skill that you can learn as an individual is to learn how to distinguish the truth from lies. Because this is what a lot of social engineering is about. It's about essentially hoodwinking you, it's lying to you, and you have to figure out what's real. Is this a real situation? Is this really my managing director on holiday asking for money? Or is this some made up thing? And this is something that's generally worth learning, even beyond cybersecurity. It's worth knowing in general, because one of AI's current weaknesses is that it does have a tendency to tell you information with great confidence, regardless of its truth or otherwise. And
it's a very interesting point you make there, Jerry, about the importance of being able to tell the truth from lies, and cybersecurity is just one area where that's so important. I thought Esther asked a very good question during the registration, which is there going to be a point where it's impossible to protect ourselves? And actually where the power of AI means that we kind of lose control of the online world, and it just becomes a sort of a Mad Max dystopia. And I think in some ways that relates to a question that Matthew was just asking about: should we be hosting our own servers on site? I was at an event the other day where I was on the panel and someone said, should we type up our disaster plans and have them all printed out? And then I saw some advice online about printing out all your disaster plans. Do we in some ways have to shelter from the online world, which is becoming dominated by criminals, and move into a space which is lower tech?
No, I think the opposite is true. I think there's plenty of good, positive stuff going on to protect people, and people are extremely resilient. We're good at solving problems like that. So yes, it's a challenge, but we're good at inventing ways to get around this and to protect ourselves. So I think it would be a shame if we just gave up and sort of let it all go, because that would be probably a disaster for humanity. The amount of good that it brings to have a connected world is amazing, and for commerce itself, it's been the biggest increase of commerce ever to have interconnected systems, both for the supply chain side and also retail, where you can start a company up and sell cricket bats to Madagascar from your bedroom in Kent. So
yeah, I think the internet has certainly brought hugely. But if you go back in time, go back to the Wild West, right, in the stagecoach, you're always going to get robbed. If somebody wants to rob you, they will rob you. It's a question of your risk appetite and being prepared for that incident when that actually happens. If you've got a framework that says we know that if we get hit, this is what we're going to do, and here's the process we're going to follow around that, you can minimize an awful lot of that. Otherwise, you may as well lock yourself in your house and never go outside, because you might get run over crossing a road, right? It's the possibility is there, but if you look left, you look right, and you look left again, likelihood is you're not going to be. So you can minimize.
I think we see AI having as much of a positive effect as it's having a negative effect. Let's move on to the last bit, because we're running out of time, and I'm determined not to crash the pips, so to speak. So Susanna, Claire, and a couple of others asked basically, what's the most important thing we should go away with? What's the one thing where we can add most value? So let me just go around and say, what's the pearl of wisdom or key takeaway from this session? Don, what would you say?
I'd say cybersecurity isn't just a technical issue; it's a leadership issue. If you want your team to take it seriously, start by looking in the mirror.
David?
Risk should be a standing agenda item on any board meeting.
Jerry?
It's all about preparation, preparation, and preparation. The more you can think about and do in advance, the simpler and better your life will be.
Jerry, can you take 1 minute to talk about our strategic cyber risk session, which is a 90-minute session that we organise for clients and prospects? Can you just talk briefly about that?
Yeah, so we put together a session really to educate board members and leaders of businesses about cyber in a non-technical way, because ultimately what we've just been discussing is that mostly this is a business issue. It happens to be one that requires an element of understanding of some of the technology and the way one can defend oneself from the problems, but ultimately it's a matter of figuring out what risk is your business under, and how much are you prepared to accept of that risk, and therefore what are you prepared to pay to defend yourself. And so we run this session to give a broad understanding of that landscape. And then following that, we can delve into, of course, much more detail for any given company. But for any given business, it's really good to have a tailored session just for you that looks at those issues.
Okay, thank you all very much. If anyone wants to know more, if anyone wants to talk about cybersecurity or any other aspect of their technology, systems, automation, and business strategy, then we are always happy to help. Thank you to everyone who's joined us for this webinar, and I think I'm going to say goodbye there. Thank you very much.